There are moments that divide a life clean in two before and after. For a widow with 3 small boys and $4 in her pocket. That moment came on a summer evening in 1882 when a door closed and the last thread of family cut loose. This is a story about what happens when the people who should hold you let you fall, and when a stranger's hand reaches out instead. It's about finding home in the last place you'd look, and learning that kindness, not blood, builds the strongest walls. Some folks say the frontier was hard. It was. But it also had room for second chances, if you were brave enough to take them. The sister-in-law's hand rested on the silver bowl, fingers stroking the rim. She wouldn't meet Sarah's eyes. "You understand," she said to the lamp, not to Sarah. A woman alone, it draws talk. Behind Sarah, Thomas hiccuped, 5 years old, trying not to cry. Her hand found his small shoulder. Pressed once, he went still. The brother-in-law slid coins across the table toward his wife, not toward Sarah. The sound scraped like metal on bone. "We've got our own burdens," he said. Sarah's eldest, Daniel, stood straighter, 12 years old, and his jaw set exactly like his father's had, the one in the grave 3 months now. "Yes," Sarah heard herself say. "Of course." Her carpetbag strap broke when she reached the porch. She knelt in the dark, knotted it with shaking fingers. The door closed behind them. Lamplight cut off clean. If you've ever stood alone in a strange town with everything you own in one broken bag, you know that first cold breath of fear. Drop a comment and let me know where you're watching from. Sometimes it helps to know we're not walking these hard roads alone. The buckboard driver chewed tobacco and spat over the side every quarter mile. Sarah counted. At the 7th spit, they rolled into Jessup Springs. He stopped at the mercantile, climbed down, held out his palm. Sarah gave him the 20 cents they'd agreed on. He looked at the coins, looked at her 3 boys in the wagon bed, handed back 2. "That'll do," he said, and walked off. Sarah opened her hand, counted. $4, 45 cents left. The sun beat down brass hot on the boardwalk. Every sign she passed felt like a fist rooms. $2 per night. Meals, 50 cents. She did the arithmetic in her head, over and over. The numbers didn't change. The general store owner swept his porch. His broom stopped when they passed, started again when they didn't stop. He didn't ask questions, just swept. Thomas's hand was damp in hers. Jacob pressed against her other side. Daniel walked a step behind, the carpetbag dragging. A woman in calico stood across the street. She saw them. Put her hand on her daughter's shoulder, turned the girl around, walked her back inside. The door shut with a bang that carried. Sarah's eyes stopped meeting people's eyes. She looked at buildings instead. False front boards warped in the heat. Paint peeling, a horseshoe nailed crooked above one door. The boarding house had lace curtains. Sarah climbed the steps. Boys behind her. Knocked. A woman opened it partway. Her hand stayed on the frame. "Help you. I need a room. For myself and my 3 sons." The woman's eyes went from Sarah's morning dress to the boys to the broken carpetbag strap. Full up. Sarah could see the hallway behind her. 3 doors, all open, all empty. "I can pay. I said we're full." The door closed. Sarah stood on the top step. The boys hadn't moved. She could feel them waiting for her to know what to do. She didn't know what to do. The mercantile had a bench out front. She sat. The boys sat. Her hand went to her pocket, touched the coins through the fabric. $4, 45 cents. Maybe 4 days if she was careful. Maybe 3. Daniel broke the silence first. "Mama," he said, voice low. "There's a man watching us." Sarah unwrapped the biscuit from the checkered cloth. Her last one. She broke it in 3 pieces. Her hands shook and crumbs scattered into her lap. She gave the pieces to the boys. They ate in silence, not looking at each other. She wasn't hungry anyway. Her stomach had closed up tight as a fist. A man walked a sorrel mare to the water trough across the street. The horse had a white blaze down her face, switching flies with her tail. The man removed his hat, grey felt, sweat-stained, and dunked his head in the trough after the horse finished drinking. Water ran down his neck into his collar. He straightened, put his hat back on, glanced toward the bench. His eyes passed over them, moved on. He picked up the mare's reins, started loading supplies into his saddlebags from the mercantile porch. Sarah looked down at the crumbs in her lap, brushed them away. Footsteps on the boards, coming closer. Stopping. She didn't look up. "Folks waiting on you in town." The voice was quiet. rough from disuse, like he didn't talk much. Sarah's chin lifted. She met his eyes. They were gray as his hat, and they didn't pity her. No, she said. He shifted his weight. The boards creaked under his boots. His hat brim threw shadow across his face. I come to town Saturdays, he said, for supplies. Saw you sitting here when I came out. He looked at the three of them. Daniel's two short pants, Jacob's scuffed knees, Thomas's hiccuping breath. Got a ranch west of here, he said. Stopped. Started again. Boys could learn ranch work if they're willing. Sarah's spine stiffened. The word charity formed on her tongue. He must have seen it in her face because he kept talking. Postmaster mentioned town needs a teacher. School burned down last winter. Kids go without now. He cleared his throat. You read? Yes. Could teach them. Then, in a barn. Maybe. Till they rebuild. Sarah's mouth opened, closed. Her hands gripped her skirt. Daniel stood up before she could speak. We work, mister, he said. His voice cracked on the last word, but he didn't look away. We ain't beggars. The man's eyes flicked to Daniel, back to Sarah. Something changed in his face, not softening, but settling. Didn't figure you were, he said. Sarah's throat closed. She swallowed. It hurt. What's the pay? You'll have a roof over your head, 3 meals, fair trade for your work teaching and helping around the place. The words hung there between them. Sarah looked at her boys, at the street where the woman had pulled her daughter inside, at her own hands, raw-knuckled in her lap. The man waited, didn't push, didn't speak. His mare shifted behind him, nosing his shoulder. $4, 45 cents, 3 days, maybe 4. Then what? Then the street, then begging, then worse. Sarah stood. Her knees felt loose, but she locked them. All right, she said. The man held out his hand. Sarah's hand shook when she reached for it. His palm was calloused, rope scars across the base of his fingers. His grip was brief, firm, and he let go first. Ethan Wade, he said. Sarah Brennan. He nodded once, picked up their carpet bag before she could. The broken strap dangled. Wagons at the livery curtain, he said. This way. He walked ahead, not looking back to see if they followed. Sarah's hand found Thomas's shoulder. Jacob pressed against her side. Daniel walked beside her now, not behind. They followed. The sorrel mare walked quiet beside Ethan Wade, reins loose in his hand. Sarah watched the set of his shoulders. The way he didn't hurry, didn't slow, just walked steady toward the livery stable at the end of the street. Her boots scuffed the boardwalk. The sole on her left one was separating. She could feel the boards through it. Ethan Wade stopped at the livery door, turned. You got other belongings strung coming on the stage. Sarah looked at the carpet bag in his hand, at her 3 boys, at the $4, 45 cents in her pocket. No, she said, that's all. He studied her face for a long moment, then nodded. Let's get you home, then, he said, and stepped inside. Sarah's feet didn't move. The word home echoed in her head like a stone dropped down a well, waiting to hear if it hit bottom or just kept falling. The wagon bed had a folded blanket. Thomas climbed in first, then Jacob. They sat with their backs against the side rail, legs pulled up. Daniel sat beside Sarah on the bench seat, the carpet bag between his feet. Ethan clicked his tongue. The wagon lurched forward. Nobody spoke. The road ran west, sun dropping toward the hills. Dust rose in ochre clouds behind them, settling on Sarah's black dress, on the boys' shoulders. Thomas's head drooped against Jacob's arm. His eyes closed. Jacob's hand came up, awkward, and steadied him. Sarah's hands gripped the edge of the bench. The wood was rough, full of splinters. She didn't loosen her hold. The land opened up, sage and scrub grass, a creek bed running dry. In the distance, a line of cottonwoods marked water that still ran. Ethan guided the horses toward it. The ranch sat in a shallow valley, log walls, mud chinked between them, shake shingle roof, mossy on the north side, one window with real glass catching the last sun. A barn behind, smaller than she expected, a corral with 4 horses standing hip-shot in the shade. Ethan stopped the wagon in front of the house. You're home now, he said. Not soft, just a fact. Sarah's throat closed. He climbed down, reached for their bag. The boys scrambled out of the wagon bed. Thomas stumbled, still half asleep. Daniel caught his arm. "Barn first," Ethan said. "Horses need feeding." The boys followed him. Sarah stood beside the wagon, watching them go. The door to the house stood open. She could see inside plank floor, a table, the black bulk of an iron stove. Her feet moved. She climbed the 2 steps to the porch. The boards didn't creak. Solid. Inside smelled like lye soap and wood smoke. The table had 2 chairs, 1 ladder back, one made from a stump with the bark still on. The stove was cold but clean. No grease splatters, a window over the dry sink, no curtain, 2 doors, one open, one closed. Sarah walked to the open one, a bedroom, small. Iron bedstead with rope springs pulled tight, a quilt laid across it 9-patch pattern, calico faded to soft colors. No dust on the floor, no cobwebs in the corners. She stood in the doorway. Her hand rose, touched the door frame. The wood was smooth, worn. Footsteps behind her. She turned. Ethan stood in the main room, hat in his hands. "I'll bring more chairs from the barn," he said. "For the table." Sarah's voice came out rough. "Where will you sleep?" "Barn's got a room. I'll bunk there." "No." He stopped. "Boys and I take the small room," Sarah said. "You keep yours." Ethan's jaw worked. He looked at the floor, at his hat, back at her. "All right," he said. He walked past her to the closed door, opened it. The other bedroom, larger. A trunk at the foot of the bed. He pulled out a quilt, folded it over his arm. "I'll show the boys where things are," he said, and left. Sarah walked to the pantry, a corner cupboard with plank shelves, a flour sack tied shut, beans in a tin, coffee, a cone of sugar wrapped in paper, mouse droppings in the corner, swept into a neat pile like someone had tried but given up. Her hands knew what to do before her mind caught up. She found the beans, dumped them in a pot, pumped water from the sink, it ran rust brown, then clear, set the pot on the stove, kindling in a box beside it, matches on the shelf. Her hands shook lighting the first one. It went out. The second one caught. The boys came back smelling like horses and hay. Thomas's hands were sticky from apple juice. They sat on the floor, backs against the wall, and watched her move around the kitchen. She found a skillet, cornmeal in a crock, mixed it with water, a pinch of salt, poured it in the skillet, set it on the stove. The smell of it cooking filled the room, crackling crust, steam rising. Ethan came in last. He'd brought 3 chairs from somewhere, set them at the table without speaking. They ate on tin plates. Sarah's hands remembered how to do this: scoop beans, break cornbread, pass the pieces. The boys ate like they hadn't seen food in days. Maybe they hadn't. Not like this, not at a table with chairs and plates and someone serving. Ethan took 3 helpings of beans, ate a steady, not fast. When his plate was empty, he set down his fork, pushed back from the table. "Fine meal," he said. "Thank you." Sarah's eyes burned. She looked down at her own plate. Still full. She hadn't touched it. "You're welcome," she whispered. The boys were watching her, waiting for something. She didn't know what. Ethan stood, carried his plate to the sink, pumped water over it. "There's a coal oil lamp," he said, not turning around. "I'll light it before I head to the barn." Sarah watched his back, the set of his shoulders. He reached for the lamp on the shelf, struck a match. The wick caught. He adjusted it with careful fingers until the flame burned steady. Yellow light filled the room. Shadows pressed against the walls. Ethan set the lamp in the center of the table, looked at her once, just once, then picked up his hat. "Good night," he said, and walked out. The door closed soft behind him. Sarah sat at the table, the boys sat on the floor. The lamp burned between them. Outside, footsteps crossed the yard toward the barn. A door opened, closed. Thomas's eyes were already closing. Jacob yawned. Daniel watched Sarah's face. "Mama," he said, quiet. "Are we staying?" Sarah looked at the empty plate where Ethan had sat, at the lamp he'd lit, at the quilt she could see through the bedroom door. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. Sarah woke to silence. The boys still slept. Thomas curled against Jacob's back. Grey light came through the window. Pre-dawn. Footsteps outside. Quiet. A bucket handle creaking. The pump groaning. Then water splashing. She rose, pulled her dress on over her shift. The floor was cold under her bare feet. She found her boots by the door, laced them. The kitchen was empty, but the stove was warm. Someone had already built the fire. 6 eggs sat in a bowl beside it, straw still clinging to the shells. Sarah's hands hovered over them. She looked toward the window. Ethan's shape moved past, carrying something toward the barn. She cracked the eggs into the skillet. The yolks broke and ran together. She didn't care. The door opened. Daniel came in, hair sticking up on one side. "Mr. Wade says I'm to learn milking," he said. "All right." Daniel looked at her, waiting. She nodded. He left. Sarah fried salt pork until it was crisp, made coffee strong and black. Through the window, she could see Daniel at the barn, Ethan beside him. A red cow with a white face stood in the stanchion. Daniel sat on a 3-legged stool, reaching for the udder. The cow shifted. Her hoof caught the bucket. It rang across the dirt. Daniel jerked back. Ethan's hand steadied the bucket, set it upright. His mouth moved. She couldn't hear the words. Daniel tried again. The bucket tipped. Ethan righted it, said something. Daniel's shoulders hunched. Third time. Daniel's hands found the teats, pulled. Nothing. Pulled again. A thin stream hit the bucket bottom. Then another. Then it came steady, foaming white against the tin. Daniel's head turned toward Ethan. Even from here, Sarah could see the grin splitting his face. Her throat closed. She turned back to the stove. Jacob and Thomas came out, rubbing their eyes. They ate standing up, sopping biscuit in the bacon grease. When the plate was clean, they ran outside. Sarah washed dishes in the basin. Lye soap stung the crack in her thumb. She watched Jacob follow Ethan across the yard, copying his walk, the slight hitch in the left leg, the way his thumbs hooked in his belt. Ethan stopped at the fence rail, pulled up a grass blade, put it between his thumbs. He blew. A sharp whistle cut the morning. Jacob grabbed his own grass blade, put it to his lips, blew. Nothing. Tried again. Air hissed out the sides. Ethan took it from him, positioned it different, handed it back. Jacob blew. A thin, wobbly whistle emerged. His eyes went wide. He laughed. Sarah's hands stopped moving in the wash water. The sound hit her chest like a fist. She'd forgotten that sound. 3 months since she'd heard Jacob laugh. Her fingers found the edge of the basin, gripped it. Water dripped off her wrists. Hoofbeats on the road. Sarah dried her hands, walked to the door. A woman rode up on a grey mare, side saddle. Her dress was good calico, her bonnet starched. She dismounted without waiting for help, looped the reins over the fence rail. "You the woman staying here?" she called. Sarah stepped onto the porch. "Yes." The woman walked closer. Her eyes traveled from Sarah's morning dress to the boys by the fence to Ethan standing in the barn doorway. "I'm Mrs. Brennan," she said. "My ranch is 2 miles east." Sarah Brennan. Mrs. Brennan's eyebrows rose. "Brennan, but my married name." "Ah." Mrs. Brennan's mouth pursed. Her eyes cut to Ethan, back to Sarah. "You his wife." Sarah's spine straightened. "I teach the children." "What children?" "Mr. Wade mentioned the town needs a teacher. The school burned. I'm going to teach any who need it." Mrs. Brennan's eyes narrowed. She studied Sarah's face for a long moment. Then she looked at the boys again, Jacob still holding his grass blade, Thomas sitting on the fence rail, Daniel coming from the barn with the milk pail. "My daughter's 8, Mrs. Brennan said. "Doesn't read yet." "I can teach her. What's your price?" Sarah's mind went blank. She hadn't thought about price. Her mouth opened. "No price," she said. "Just if you've got eggs to spare or milk, whatever you can." Mrs. Brennan's eyes shifted. Something in her face changed, not softening, but settling, like a door opening a crack. "I'll send her tomorrow," she said. She untied her reins, mounted. 8 o'clock, don't waste her time." "I won't." Mrs. Brennan rode off. Sarah stood on the porch, watching the dust settle. Ethan walked over, pushed his hat back. "You know how to teach." "I can read, I can write. That's more than nothing." He nodded, looked at the barn. "I'll set up some benches. Case more calm." "You think they will?" "Mrs. Brennan talks. Others listen." He started toward the barn, stopped. "Need supplies from town next week. You need anything for teaching?" Sarah thought of her Bible, the margins worn thin from her mother's fingers, her own. The spine cracked, pages loose. "A reader," she said. "If they have one. McGuffey's, if you can find it." "All right." Over the next week, Ethan built benches in the barn. Rough planks on sawhorses, no nails wasted. Sarah swept the floor, pushed hay bales against the walls for extra seating. Mrs. Brennan sent her daughter Anna the following Monday. By Wednesday, 3 more children came, 2 boys from a ranch south, a girl whose mother was sick. By Friday, 6 children sat on benches and hay bales, slate tablets on their laps. Ethan had ridden to town Thursday, come back with a McGuffey second reader wrapped in brown paper. Cost 35 cents. He set it on the kitchen table without a word. Sarah stood before the children that first morning, chalk in her hand. Her hands didn't shake. A, she said, and wrote it on the slate. Like apple. 6 heads bent, 6 hands moved. Chalk squeaked. One of the boys stuck his tongue between his teeth, concentrating so hard his whole face scrunched. Sarah walked behind them, watching their letters form. Some backward, some sideways, all trying. When the lesson ended, she opened the McGuffey reader. Listen, she said, and read the first story short. Simple words about a cat and a rat. Thomas sat in the corner, watching. His lips moved with the words, trying to follow. Mrs. Brennan came to collect Anna. She stood in the barn doorway, watching Sarah gather the slates. Same time tomorrow, Mrs. Brennan asked. Yes. Mrs. Brennan nodded. She reached into her basket, pulled out a jar, set it on the bench. Peach preserves, she said. From last summer. She left before Sarah could answer. Sarah picked up the jar. The wax seal was perfect, unbroken. She held it to the light, gold fruit suspended in amber syrup. She set it down carefully. Her hands were shaking again, but not from fear this time. Daniel's fingers fumbled the cinch strap. It slipped through the metal ring, fell loose against the horse's belly. The gelding shifted, blew air through his nostrils. Try again, Ethan said. Daniel grabbed the strap, threaded it through, pulled, not tight enough. The saddle would slide. Ethan's hand covered Daniel's, guided it. Feel that snug, not choking. Horse needs to breathe. Over the next week, Daniel's hands learned. On the 7th try, he got it right. The cinch held firm. He looked up at Ethan, waiting. Good, Ethan said. Mount up. They rode the fence line together that afternoon, checking posts. Daniel sat tall in the saddle, reins loose like Ethan had shown him. When they reached the far corner, Ethan reined in. You'll do, he said. Daniel's face split into a grin that made him look 12 again instead of trying to be 20. In the yard, Jacob scattered cracked corn for the chickens. He counted them while they pecked 14 hens. One rooster he'd named General because the bird chased everyone but him. Jacob moved among them with careful hands, collecting eggs in his shirt. He brought them to Sarah in the kitchen, setting each one gentle in the bowl. 15 today, he said, proud. Thomas knelt in the garden beside Sarah, his small fingers pushing bean seeds into the dirt she'd hoed. The furrows ran straight, marked with string she'd tied between stakes. By midsummer, tomato plants climbed their wooden supports, leaves broad and green, squash vines spread between the rows, yellow flowers opening to the sun. This one, Thomas asked, holding up a seed, 2 inches deep, pressed the dirt down after. His fingers poked a hole, dropped the seed, covered it, patted the earth flat, moved to the next spot. Sarah's hands moved steady in the soil, no trembling. She noticed it without thinking, then noticed that she'd noticed. Her palms were calloused now from the hoe handle. The crack in her thumb had healed. Ethan came back one evening leading a mule with a deer carcass tied across it. The venison hung in the barn overnight. Next morning, he butchered it, brought the shoulder roast to the kitchen wrapped in cheesecloth. Sarah made stew in the big pot venison, potatoes, onions, carrots from the root cellar. It filled the house with steam and the rich smell of meat cooking slow. They ate it for 3 days, the flavor deepening each time she reheated it. She stretched it with more potatoes on the 3rd day. Still plenty. Sunday came with clear skies. No school. The boys were restless by mid-morning, poking each other, arguing over nothing. Ethan looked up from mending harness. Creek's good for swimming, if that suits. Sarah's hands paused on the dish rag. Swimming meant the boys in their underclothes, meant Ethan seeing them that way, meant propriety stretched thin as creek water. 3 faces turned toward her, hoping. All right, she said. She sat on the bank, skirts tucked under her knees, and watched Ethan wade in first. The water ran clear over brown stones. Willows hung low on the far side, trailing branches in the current. He showed them how to float, one hand under each back, Thomas first, giggling when water got in his ears, then Jacob, serious and determined. Daniel last, too proud to need much help but accepting it anyway. Ethan was patient, never rough, never hurried. When Jacob went under and came up sputtering, Ethan was already there, lifting him, waiting until the coughing stopped. "Again, Mo?" he asked. Jacob nodded, eyes streaming, and went under again. Sarah sat very still and watched the man who'd offered them a roof teach her sons to swim in water that ran cold from the mountains. The sun caught the drops on their skin. Their laughter echoed off the willows. That night, she tucked Thomas into bed. He was already half asleep, sunburned and happy. "Mama," he mumbled. "I like it here." She kissed his forehead. It was warm from the sun, smelled like creek water and little boy sweat. "Me too, baby," she whispered. Daniel lay in his cot, staring at the ceiling. She sat on the edge. "We staying, he asked. His voice was low, careful, like he was afraid of the answer. Sarah smoothed his hair back from his forehead. It was getting long, needed cutting. "Yes," she said. His eyes closed. His breath evened out. She stood in the doorway, looking at her 3 sons sleeping. The lamplight from the kitchen spilled across the floor, touching the edge of Thomas's blanket, the corner of Jacob's pillow. In the kitchen, Ethan sat at the table with her boots. He had an awl in his hand, waxed thread, a scrap of leather. The sole on her left boot lay open like a mouth. He was stitching it closed. She didn't ask. He didn't explain. She went to the pantry, found the dried apples she'd been saving, soaked them in water until they plumped, made pie crust from lard and flour, rolled it thin. The sugar was precious, but she used it anyway, sprinkling it over the fruit. The pie baked while she cleaned the supper dishes. The smell filled the house, cinnamon and apple and butter. When it was done, she cut 2 slices, set one in front of Ethan, took the other for herself. He ate slowly, fork scraping the tin plate, finished it. She cut another slice without asking. He ate that too. "Thank you," he said, pushing the plate away. "Your boots are done," he said, nodding at them by the door. She picked them up. The sole was tight, stitches small and even, stronger than before. "Thank you," she said. They sat at the table. The lamp burned between them. Outside, a coyote called from the hills. Another answered. "Fence on the north pasture needs mending," Ethan said. "Post rotted through." "I saw clouds earlier," Sarah said. "Think it'll rain." "Could. We need it." Silence settled. Not empty. Full of things that didn't need saying. Sarah's hands rested on the table. They didn't shake, didn't clutch at anything, just rested. She looked at them, at her own hands, and realized something that made her breath catch. She'd gone the whole day without crying, without even thinking about crying. The lamp flickered. Ethan stood, adjusted the wick. The flame steadied. "I'll say good night," he said. "Good night." He took his hat, walked to the door, paused with his hand on the latch. "Sarah," he said. She looked up. He opened his mouth, closed it. Whatever he'd meant to say stayed unspoken. "Sleep well," he said instead, and left. The door closed. His footsteps crossed the yard. Sarah sat alone at the table. The pie tin sat between her plate and his, most of it gone. Her boots stood by the door, mended. The lamp burned steady. She pressed her palm flat against the table, feeling the rough pine under her hand. Tomorrow was Monday. School in the morning, mending in the afternoon, supper at dusk. Tomorrow and tomorrow and tomorrow stretching out ahead of her, each one the same. Each one a gift she was just beginning to understand how to receive. But tonight, now, in this moment, she let herself sit in the quiet kitchen and feel nothing but the rough wood under her palm and the knowledge that her sons were sleeping safe in the next room and the coyotes were singing and the lamp was burning and she was. The realization hit her chest like a physical blow. She was happy. The postmaster's wagon came on a Thursday, dust rising behind it. Sarah was in the garden, pulling weeds between the tomato plants. She heard the wheels, looked up, wiped her hands on her apron. He climbed down, pulled an envelope from his satchel, walked to where she stood. "Mrs. Brennan," he said, and handed it to her. She took it, Her fingers left dirt smudges on the white paper. The handwriting made her stomach drop. She knew those letters, the hard downstrokes, the cramped capitals, her brother-in-law's hand. "Thank you," she managed. The postmaster tipped his hat, climbed back up. The wagon rolled away. Sarah stood holding the envelope. The sun beat down on her shoulders. A fly landed on her wrist. She didn't brush it away. Inside, she set it on the table, stared at it. The boys were at school in the barn. She could hear their voices reciting letters. Ethan was mending fence in the north pasture. She was alone. Her fingers trembled opening it. The seal broke. She unfolded the paper. The words hit her like fists. "Sarah, it has come to my attention that you are living in questionable circumstances with a man not your husband. This is unseemly and provides no proper environment for the boys, as their uncle and closest male relation. It is my Christian duty to intervene. The boys require a man's guidance and the structure of a proper family. Your situation, a woman alone, dependent on charity. Teaching in a barn like a vagrant is unsuitable. I will be making arrangements to collect Daniel, Jacob, and Thomas within the month. They will be raised as they should be, in a God-fearing household with family who can provide properly for them. Any legal resistance to this will be met in kind. I have consulted with counsel and been assured of my rights in this matter. I trust you will see reason and not make this more difficult than necessary. J. Brennan." Sarah's breath stopped in her throat. The paper shook in her hands. Questionable circumstances, vagrant, dependent on charity. Her face burned. She could feel the shame crawling up her neck, hot and thick. Every word was a stone pressing on her chest. He was right. She had nothing, no money, no claim. She lived in another man's house, slept under his roof, fed her children with his provisions. She was exactly what he said, dependent, unsuitable, a woman with no standing. The paper crumpled in her fist, her other hand pressed against her stomach. The stew she'd eaten for breakfast threatened to come back up. She stood there in the empty kitchen, letter crushed in her hand, and felt everything she'd built in the past weeks crumble like sand. Of course it couldn't last. Of course someone would take it away. The shame was worse than grief. Grief was clean. This was filthy, the knowledge that she'd let herself believe she could have this, that she'd let herself relax, let herself be happy, stupid, foolish, weak. She couldn't breathe. The room pressed in. She stumbled to the door, pushed it open, gasped air that tasted like dust. Her legs carried her to the porch. She sat on the top step. The letter fell from her hand, rolled into the dirt. How long she sat there, she didn't know. The sun moved, her shadow lengthened. Footsteps, coming from the barn. She couldn't look up. The steps stopped. Silence. "Sarah." Ethan's voice. Quiet, careful. She shook her head, couldn't speak. He walked closer, picked up the letter from the dirt, unfolded it, read. She heard his breath change, saw his boots shift in her peripheral vision. He read it twice. She could tell by how long he stood there. Then he moved, sat beside her on the step, not touching, just there. The letter hung from his hand between them. "This what's got you shaking?" She nodded. "He can't do this," Ethan said. Sarah's voice came out raw. "He can. He's right. I got no claim, no money. No, I'm living on your charity, teaching in a barn. You're their mother. That doesn't matter. Not to a judge. Not when he can provide and I..." Her voice broke. "I got nothing. I am nothing." Ethan was quiet for a long moment. Then he reached across, slow, and tore the letter in half. The sound was loud in the stillness. He tore it again and again. Let the pieces fall. "I rode to town Tuesday," he said. "Talked to Judge Carver. Asked him about guardianship law." Sarah's head lifted. "Daniel's near 13. Ethan continued. "Judge said at 13, a boy can speak for himself in court, can choose his guardian. Law recognizes that. But the younger ones, Judge also said a mother's claim is strongest, especially when she's providing proper care, which you are, teaching 12 children, keeping house, working honest." Sarah's hands twisted in her apron. "But he has money, a house, a wife. He also turned you out when you needed help." Ethan's voice was flat. "Judge will ask about that. What if the judge sides with him anyway? Then we fight it." Ethan looked at her. "But Daniel can speak, and he will." A sound from the doorway. They both turned. Daniel stood there, Jacob and Thomas behind him. Daniel's face was white, jaw set hard. "I ain't going back there," he said. His voice shook, but his eyes were fierce. "I'll run first. I'll take Jacob and Thomas and we'll run and he'll never find us." Jacob stepped forward. "We stay with Mama." Thomas's small voice, "We stay here." Sarah's hands covered her mouth. Tears ran down her face, hot and shameful. Ethan stood, looked at the boys, looked at Sarah. "I'll write him," he said. "Tell him the boys stay with their mother. Tell him Daniel's old enough to choose, and he's chosen. Tell him if he wants to fight it in court, Judge Carver'll hear both sides. He said he has a lawyer. Let him have 10. Doesn't change facts. You're their ma. This is where they live." "Daniel's near 13 and old enough to speak his mind legal. That's the end of it." He walked past the boys into the house. Sarah heard him moving things in the kitchen, a drawer opening, paper rustling. Daniel sat beside her. Jacob and Thomas pressed against her other side. "Mama," Daniel said, low, "we ain't going, you understand, we ain't." She nodded, couldn't speak. Inside, she heard Ethan's pen scratching. The sound went on more than 3 sentences. When he finished, he came out, envelope in hand. "I'll post this tomorrow," he said. Told him you're working honest, teaching children, providing proper care. Told him Daniel's 13 come November and can speak for himself. Told him Judge Carver knows the situation and will hear the case if he pushes it. He looked at the torn letter pieces in the dirt. Told him to think careful before he spends money on a fight he'll lose. That night, Sarah lay awake listening to her sons breathe. The moon was bright through the window. She could see their faces, Daniel's jaw slack in sleep. Jacob's hand curled under his cheek, Thomas's mouth open. Hers, her son's. The shame still sat in her chest, heavy and hot. The letter's words still echoed vagrant, unsuitable, dependent. But under it, something else, something harder. She thought of Ethan tearing the letter, of riding to town to talk to the judge, of writing back with facts and law, not just anger. She thought of Daniel's fierce eyes, of Jacob and Thomas pressing against her. She thought of the garden she'd planted, the children she'd taught, the meals she'd cooked, the mending she'd done. Maybe it wasn't enough. Maybe a judge would look at her and see exactly what her brother-in-law saw, a woman with nothing, living on charity, unsuitable. But maybe her hand pressed against her chest, feeling her heart beat steady and strong. Maybe she'd fight anyway. The first frost came in October. Sarah woke to white coating the grass outside the window, crunching under her boots when she stepped onto the porch. Her breath made clouds in the air. She wrapped her shawl, grey wool, unraveling at one edge around her shoulders, and walked to the wood pile. Ethan was already there, axe raised. He brought it down. The log split clean, fell in 2 pieces. He set another, raised the axe again. He paused mid-swing, looked at her. She looked back. Neither spoke, both smiled. He finished the swing, set down the axe, gathered the kindling. "Cold's coming early, though," he said. "Yes." That was all. He carried the wood to the house. She followed. By noon, the frost had burned off, but the air stayed sharp. In the fields, corn shucks stood brown and dry. Sarah and the boys spent the next week bringing in the harvest corn in bushel baskets, squash heavy in their arms, beans dried on the vine rattling into burlap sacks. Daniel worked alongside Ethan, moving steady and sure. At 13, he'd grown 3 inches since summer. His shoulders had broadened. When he lifted a sack of corn, the muscles in his arms stood out like rope. Jacob built an addition to the chicken coop without being asked. He measured twice, cut once, the way Ethan had taught him. The boards fit tight, no gaps for weasels. Thomas read aloud to the younger students, now 5-year-olds, sitting on hay bales. Mouths open, listening to him sound out words from the McGuffey reader. He was patient when they didn't understand, repeated himself without irritation. Word had spread through the county. By autumn, 12 children came to school. The barn was crowded with parents brought payment eggs, milk, butter wrapped in cheesecloth, sometimes a chicken, once a side of bacon. Mrs. Brennan came one morning with a basket, set it on the desk without meeting Sarah's eyes. "Preserves," she said. "Peach and tomato both." Sarah looked at the jars. "The wax seal's perfect." "Thank you." Mrs. Brennan's hands twisted in her apron. "I was wrong about you," she said, voice low. "When you first came, I thought—" She stopped, started again. "I was wrong." Sarah's throat closed. She nodded. Mrs. Brennan left quickly. like she'd said too much. That night, Sarah made supper venison stew stretched with potatoes, the last of it. Ethan brought a haunch of beef next day. She didn't ask where he got it. After the boys were asleep, she sat in the kitchen with her mending basket. The lamp burned between her and Ethan. He carved a wooden horse for Thomas, cedar shavings curling from his pocket knife. Outside, the wind picked up. A shutter banged somewhere. "I was alone 2 years before you came," Ethan said, not looking up from his carving. Sarah's needle paused halfway through the sock she was darning. 2 years. Her voice came out rough. "My wife died. Fever. Our daughter with her." He turned the horse in his hands, studying it. "Been quiet since?" The sock in Sarah's lap had a hole worn through the heel. She'd been darning it wrong. Started over. "I thought I'd be alone the rest of my life," she said. "Yeah." The fire popped. Embers settled. Ethan set down his knife. The horse was nearly finished, smooth body, carved mane, legs that would stand. "I'd like you to stay," he said. "Long as you want." Sarah's hands went still on the sock. She looked at him across the lamp. "I'd like that," she said. He nodded once, picked up his knife again. That was all. No promises, no declarations, just that. But Sarah's chest felt different, lighter, like something that had been clenched tight for months had finally loosened. Next morning, Ethan loaded his trunk into a wheelbarrow, pushed it to the barn. When he came back, the trunk was gone from the bedroom. Just the bed and the empty floor. Sarah was kneading bread dough at the table. She looked at him. He looked back. "Suits better this way," he said. "Yes." He poured coffee, sat at the table, watched her work the dough. Her hands were white with flour up to the wrists. "Fence on the east pasture's getting loose," Bertie said. "Saw a hawk yesterday," she said. "Big one, circling over the garden. They're after the chickens." Jacob scared it off. They sat in comfortable quiet. The dough rose under Sarah's hands. The coffee steamed. When the neighbors rode past now, they tipped their hats. Called good morning. Stopped to talk about weather and crops and whether the snow would come early. Mrs. Carver from the ranch west brought her 2 daughters to school. Said she'd heard Sarah was teaching proper. Mr. Henderson asked if Daniel wanted work come spring, helping with calving. Good pay. Sarah stopped flinching when people looked at her. Stopped waiting for judgment. They could think what they wanted. She had her sons. She had her work. She had this. One evening in late October, she stood in the doorway watching Daniel and Ethan mend fence in the far pasture. Their shapes were small against the setting sun. Jacob was in the barn, hammering something. Thomas sat on the porch steps, reading to himself, lips moving with the words. The sky was orange and purple and deep blue all at once. The air smelled like wood smoke and coming winter and earth turning cold. Sarah's hand rested on the doorframe. The wood was smooth under her palm. She'd planted the garden that fed them. She'd taught 12 children to read. She'd mended clothes and cooked meals and scrubbed floors and done everything her hands could find to do. She wasn't dependent. She was working. She wasn't unsuitable. She was suitable exactly where she was. The shame from the letter had settled somewhere deep, a heart knot she could feel but couldn't reach. But over it, around it, growing stronger every day, was something else. Not happiness exactly, steadier than that. More solid. Peace, maybe, or close to it. That night after supper, Ethan sat on the porch whittling. Sarah brought coffee out, handed him a cup, sat in the other chair. He'd built a second one, planed the wood smooth so no splinters caught. The boys were catching fireflies in the yard, their laughter floating back. "I'm not afraid anymore," Sarah said. Ethan's knife paused on the wood. He looked at her. "Good," he said. Pause. The knife moved again. "Me neither," he said. The words hung there. Both of them knew what they meant. Both of them had been running from something. Both of them had stopped. The stars came out. The boys put their fireflies in a jar with a punched lid, set it on the porch rail to watch them blink. Thomas yawned, leaned against Sarah's knee. She ran her hand through his hair. "Mama," he said, sleep already pulling at him. "We're staying forever." Sarah looked at Ethan. He looked back. "Long as we're wanted," she said. Ethan set down his whittling. "Then forever." Thomas smiled, eyes closing. Daniel came up the steps, Jacob behind him. They stood looking out at the dark fields, the barn, the corral. "This is home now, ain't it?" Jacob said. Sarah's hand found his shoulder. Squeezed. Yes, she said. The boys went inside. Their footsteps crossed the floor. Beds creaked. Quiet settled. Sarah and Ethan sat on the porch. The fireflies blinked in their jar. The stars wheeled overhead, somewhere distant. A coyote called. Another answered. Sarah's coffee had gone cold in her cup. She didn't care. She thought about the letter, thought about her brother-in-law's words, vagrant, unsuitable, dependent. She thought about Ethan's reply, posted weeks ago now. No response had come. Maybe there wouldn't be one. Maybe the threat had been empty. Maybe hoofbeats on the road. They both heard it. Both went still. Too late for visitors. Too deliberate for someone passing through. The horse came closer, stopped at the gate. A man dismounted, tall, broad shoulders. Even in the dark, Sarah could see the set of his jaw. Her brother-in-law. He tied his horse, walked toward the house. His boots were loud on the hard ground. Sarah's cup slipped from her hand, hit the porch floor, didn't break. Coffee spread dark across the boards. She couldn't move, couldn't breathe. He'd come. Ethan stood, stepped in front of Sarah. The brother-in-law stopped at the bottom of the porch steps. His face was shadowed, but his voice carried clear. I've come for the boys. Sarah's legs wouldn't hold her. She gripped the arm of her chair. Ethan didn't move. You got my letter? I did. Didn't change facts. Those boys need proper family. They got their mother. That's proper enough. A mother living in sin. Watch your mouth. Ethan's voice dropped low. Dangerous. There's no sin here. Just honest work and honest living. The brother-in-law's hand moved to his coat. Sarah's breath stopped, but he only pulled out papers, held them up. I got legal counsel, got rights as next male kin. Judge or no judge, you can't. The door behind them opened. Daniel stepped out. Behind him, Jacob, then Thomas. Daniel walked past Ethan, stood on the top step looking down at his uncle. I ain't going, he said. His voice didn't shake. You got no claim on me, on any of us. Oh boy, you don't understand what's proper. I understand you turned us out when we needed help. Daniel's jaw set hard. I understand Mr. Wade took us in when nobody else would. I understand my mama works every day teaching children and tending this place. That's proper enough for me. The brother-in-law's face darkened. You're 12 years old. You don't get to decide. 13, Daniel said. 13 come November. And I do get to decide. Ethan reached into his own coat, pulled out folded papers. Judge Carver put this in writing. Territory law says a boy 13 or older can petition the court to choose his guardian. Daniel turns 13 in 3 weeks. He's already filed his petition with the court. Judge approved it. He unfolded the papers, held them out. Says right here, Daniel Brennan, upon reaching age of majority for choice of guardian, chooses to remain with his mother, Sarah Brennan. Judge's signature, court seal. The brother-in-law took the papers. Read them by moonlight. His hands shook. This is you can't. It's legal, Ethan said. I paid the filing fee. Judge witnessed Daniel's statement. It's done. The younger boys are with their mother, Ethan said, where they're being properly cared for, fed, clothed, educated. You want to challenge that in court? Judge will ask why you turned them out in the first place. The brother-in-law looked at the papers, at Daniel, at Sarah. More hoofbeats. Another rider coming. Mrs. Brennan rode up on her grey mare. She dismounted, walked straight to the porch. Her husband followed on foot from where they'd left their wagon down the road. Heard raised voices, Mrs. Brennan said. She looked at the brother-in-law. You'd be the uncle from back east. This is family business. And I'm a neighbor who's known this family 4 months now. Mrs. Brennan's voice was steel. My daughters learned to read in that time, so have 11 other children. Because of her. She pointed at Sarah. Pointed. She works dawn to dusk, keeps a clean house, teaches good. If you are here to call her unsuitable, you'll have to go through every parent in this valley. Mr. Brennan stepped up beside his wife. That's right. Woman's done nothing but good since she came here. The brother-in-law's papers crumpled in his fist. She's living with a man not her husband. She's got her own room, Mrs. Brennan said sharply. Boys with her. Mr. Wade bunks in the barn. Everybody knows it. Nothing improper about honest work for honest shelter. I have legal rights. So does she, Ethan said. Mother's rights.
And I got this too. He pulled out another paper. Sworn statement from 12 families saying Sarah Brennan is of good character, provides proper care for her children, and teaches their children reading and writing. All signed, all witnessed by Judge Carver. He handed it over. The brother-in-law read it. His shoulders sagged. "You're making a mistake," he said, but his voice had no force left. "Maybe," Daniel said. "But it's my mistake to make." The brother-in-law stood silent. Then he folded the papers, put them in his coat, looked at Sarah. "I wash my hands of you two," he said. "Good," Sarah whispered. He walked to his horse, mounted, looked back once at the three boys standing on the porch. "Don't come crying to me when this falls apart, Momo," he said. Nobody answered. He rode away. The hoofbeats faded into darkness. Mrs. Brennan touched Sarah's arm. "You all right?" Sarah nodded. Couldn't speak. "Good." Mrs. Brennan mounted her mare. "We'll be going. But you need anything, you send word." They rode off. Silence. The night pressed close, full of cricket song and the distant rush of the creek. Daniel's legs gave out. He sat hard on the step. His hands were shaking. Sarah knelt beside him, pulled him against her. He was nearly as tall as her now, but he buried his face in her shoulder like he was 5 again. "You did good," she whispered. "So good." Jacob and Thomas pressed close. Ethan's hand came down on Daniel's shoulder, squeezed once, let go. They stayed like that until the shaking stopped. Winter came hard. Snow piled against the north wall. The boys learned to break ice on the water trough every morning. School continued in the barn, 8 children now whose parents would risk the weather. Spring arrived slow, the snow melted in patches, mud everywhere, then green pushing through. Sarah knelt in the garden, hands in soil still cold from winter. She planted the same rows as last year: tomatoes, beans, squash. But this time her hands knew the work, didn't hesitate, didn't shake. Movement in the far pasture caught her eye. 3 riders racing, whooping. Daniel in front on the sorrel mare, Jacob chasing on Buck, Thomas on Old Traveler bringing up the rear but laughing hard enough she could hear it from here. At the fence, Ethan leaned on the rail watching them. He was laughing too, head thrown back. Sarah sat back on her heels, looked at her hands, dirt under the nails, calluses on the palms. Strong. Looked at her sons racing across the pasture. Looked at the house behind her, smoke rising from the chimney. Curtains she'd sewn hanging in the window. The porch rail Ethan had built smooth and solid. This is home, she thought, not the house she was born in, not the one she'd shared with her first husband. This, here, now. Last day of school came in late May. The 8 students brought wildflowers, black-eyed Susans, columbine, prairie roses. They filled a mason jar on the desk, water cloudy with pollen. Mrs. Brennan brought her preserves. Mr. Henderson brought a ham, smoked and wrapped in cheesecloth. Mrs. Carver brought fabric good calico, enough for a new dress. Sarah stood in the barn doorway watching the families leave, children waving from wagon beds. "Same time next fall," Mrs. Brennan called. "Yes," Sarah said. That evening she made fried chicken, precious lard crackling in the cast iron skillet, crust going golden. The boys set the table without being asked. 4 plates, 4 cups, 4 forks. Ethan came in smelling like horse and hay. He washed at the basin, sat at his place. From his pocket he pulled something wrapped in cloth, set it in front of Sarah. She unwrapped it. 2 hair combs, tortoise shell, curved to fit, simple but fine. "For you," he said, her throat closed. "Ethan. Saw them in town last week. Thought they'd suit." She held them in her palm. They were warm from his pocket. He pulled 3 more packages from his coat, set them in front of the boys. Daniel unwrapped his pocket knife, bone handle, 2 blades sharp enough to shave with. Jacob's was the same. Thomas got one with 3 blades and a small awl. "You're working men now," Ethan said. "Need proper tools." The boys tested the blades carefully, faces serious with the weight of being trusted with something sharp. After supper, they sat on the porch. Sarah wore the combs in her hair. The boys had their knives in their pockets, hands straying to them every few minutes to make sure they were still there. The sun set orange and purple. Fireflies blinked in the grass. Thomas leaned against Sarah's knee. "We staying forever." Sarah looked at Ethan. He looked back. "Long as we're wanted," she said. "Then forever,"
he said. The boys ran to catch fireflies. Thomas found a jar. Jacob punched holes in the lid. Daniel caught 6 of them gentle in his cupped hands. Sarah and Ethan sat in the growing dark. I'm not afraid anymore, she said. Good. Silence. A coyote called from the hills. Me neither, he said. The stars came out one by one. The boy's jar glowed with 6 blinking lights. Lamplight from the kitchen window spilled gold across the porch boards. Sarah breathed in wood smoke. Coming night, earth warming after winter's freeze. She didn't say the words aloud. Didn't need to. But she knew them, felt them settle in her chest like stones building a foundation. Home isn't where you're born. It's where someone sees you standing in the dust with nothing and says you're wanted here. Stay. The fireflies blinked. The boys laughed. Ethan's hand rested on the porch rail beside hers, not touching, but close enough she could feel the warmth. She was home. There's a heaviness that comes with being told you're not enough. Some of you know what that feels like, standing in a strange place with everything you own in one broken bag, wondering if anybody sees you at all. Sarah carried that weight for months, maybe longer. It doesn't just lift because someone offers help. It sits there, quiet and stubborn, even when good things start to happen. Many of us have stood where she stood. We've felt the shame of needing. We've wondered if we deserved the kindness someone gave us.
We've built something fragile and beautiful and then waited, breath held, for it to be taken away. That's the tender part, not the rescue. But learning to believe you're allowed to stay. The story doesn't tie up clean. Sarah didn't stop being afraid because her brother-in-law rode away. Ethan didn't stop being lonely just because his house filled with voices. But they kept showing up anyway, at the table, in the garden, on the porch in the evening quiet. Sometimes that's all healing is, just showing up again. Thank you for sitting with this, for letting it rest where it needed to.